I step out onto the sand and give us a little space, and Bamele eagerly trails behind me. We're about to fight this man. I can't believe it. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the channel if you're new here. My name is Death by Pony. Today we're hopping back into Lake of Voices. Without further ado, let's hop in. Alright, we continue. Alright.
I don't know.
I can feel the weight of his words settle upon me. I've had similar thoughts, and I have had questioned what the correct choice is, but unlike Bamele, I have always been silent, and I clench my fists tight to try and stop from saying something rash. Bamele closes his eyes tight and rubs his face again. It's clear this hasn't been enough to give him much peace. Eventually his eyes reopen and look directly into mine.
What do you think about all this, Kika? Please, be honest with me. I want to hear it.
Suddenly my eyes are hot, my vision blurs slightly from tears. I desperately am trying to hold back.
I really don't know. That is the truth.
My words are soft, whether he heard or not. The look on my face is enough to garner attention. His eyebrows shoot up in surprise. He walks over to me, slowly concerned.
Kika, what is troubling you?
I don't have the answers to what you were wondering. Who are we meant to protect? Everyone we can? Whoever we're told to serve and no one else? Just ourselves? Should we only try to protect others when the risk is minimal? I have no idea what the right option is.
Molly's confusion only mounts with my words.
I am sorry for disappointing you.
No, you haven't disappointed me in any way. I never should have expected someone else to give me answers to those kinds of questions.
At least he's regretful about asking us to do that.
It is only... I did not think that...
He does not finish his thought, but I know what he meant to say.
You did not think I was concerned with these issues?
He smiles awkwardly over being caught.
Yes. You never seemed to be bothered by anything we experienced before now.
With his words, my careful held resolve crumbles in an instant. My cheeks are wet, with hot fluid cooling in the chill air as it slips down my face.
I have always cared. I've always been afraid and confused, but I have kept up a...
I stop and gasp for air, my throat almost as tight as when we were running in the bridges.
a farce of strength in order to get by.
I breathe deeply with relief, terrified and lightheaded from my confession. Molly's voice is as delicate as flower petals.
I had no idea. How could I not have noticed?
Because I did whatever I could to make sure no one did. I have never wished to appear weak in front of others. But the truth is, I barely get through each day. I often feel overwhelmed with sadness at all that we have experienced.
Molly gently places his hand on my shoulder as I try not to sob wildly.
Kika, I truly apologize for all the thoughtless things I have said to you.
I shake my head, sniffling.
There is no need for you to apologize.
He smiles, the warmth almost enough to make me forget the damp.
I beg to differ. I have failed to treat you right.
You have always been respectful.
A person needs more than respect from their comrades. They also need support. I have never given you that kind of consideration because I believed someone like you did not need it.
The same could be said for me.
Nonsense. You have listened to my rambling on more occasions than I can remember. Though I admit my memories may not be there due to being drunk many of those times.
Molly laughs at himself while glancing in my direction to encourage me to do the same. His comforting words make me smile, and I feel my tears finally cease to fall. I will continue to support you. He grins wider than he has since we began this horrible journey.
You have my thanks.
And you have mine.
Abruptly, his expression becomes a serious one.
I will come to answer these questions someday. But no matter what I decide, I will still put trust in your judgment.
I fear I may not live up to the belief he seems to have in me, but I nod firmly. He returns my nod.
Perhaps we should go check how everything is on the island.
That sounds like an excellent idea. And I will accompany you, of course.
Glad to hear it.
Together we walk back towards the interior of the island. Both our moods lift as we stay side by side. Mel and I head through the wooded part of the island. There isn't anything that could be called a path, but we manage to pick our way through the brush quite well. Through a thinner strand of trees, we briefly catch sight of the guide standing at one of the beaches. He seems fine, but even though I'm sure he turned his head towards me, he makes no show of acknowledging us. Continuing on, Bamela and I cross the island in search of Margaret. Out of nowhere, a shudder runs down my spine, and I barely stop myself from checking behind me. Darkness flickers through my mind as I hold my breath. A pat on my back brings me back into the light, and reminded that I am not alone. I look up to see my Bamele, his touch more comforting than his words could be. Suddenly, I know I do not need to hide my emotions. There is no reason to act as though nothing is wrong when it is. Bamele already knows. I have hidden my emotions for so long that it's still my first instinct, but somehow I sense an assurance from him. Bamele will be there to remind me that it is okay, and to support me when I feel I might break from the weight of our experiences. I give Bamele a hesitant glance. He notices and returns my gaze, staring into my eyes. I feel the words spill out from my mouth before I realize what I'm saying.
Would you like to take a walk with me?
I take a moment to part some brush out of my path before explaining myself.
We could pass around the edges of the forest where there's less in the way. There doesn't need to be a purpose to the walk. It only needs to be a way to spend time together.
Cute.
I would prefer that to not doing anything.
I would be delighted to accompany you, Kika.
I'm gladdened by his response, though it only makes me feel all the sillier for suggesting it.
Perhaps it may be better not to, after all. We'll be walking all throughout the night.
I believe I've spent quite enough time resting. If I'm being honest, I think I need a break from all this waiting around.
My lips curl into a smile.
All right. We'll do that then.
After we speak to Margaret.
Of course. That's our first priority.
Thank you, Bemele.
Molly moves a little closer to me.
I'm happy to.
I'm not sure if we'll be much help, but there's no way I'm leaving Margaret all alone here for longer. She may want someone to talk to. It takes longer than I hoped to track through the brambles, but we find her in a decent enough time. Margaret begrudgingly lifts her head as we approach, enabling me to see her face is damp and tear-stained, while her eyes are red and puffy. She's been crying. I shift uncomfortably on my feet.
Is something the matter?
Margaret releases a humorous laugh.
I take it the guards are doing their rounds.
Maya and I each steal a glance at one another. Maya lightly chuckles.
It seems we are. Old habits die hard.
Well, that's nice.
She speaks somewhat curtly, but at least she no longer seems depressed.
I'm happy to report that everything's in order on this front.
Good to hear that.
Margaret isn't saying what's actually on her mind, but I have no way to reach her.
Is that everything?
Molly scratches his chin.
We can leave you for now if that's what you'd like. Wouldn't want to be a nuisance.
That would be most appreciated. I'd like to have a little time to myself before we return back out there.
We'll be around if anything comes up.
Thank you for that and for stopping by.
I smile at her, but Melly gives a wave.
Be well.
Goodbye.
The two of us leave Margaret as per her request. I swallow thickly as we go. I can only hope that Margaret will be able to sort through her thoughts before it's too late. But Melly lightly squeezes my hand, garnering my attention.
So, would you still be interested in our little stroll?
Yes. That would be nice.
Melly beams at me.
We best be heading out then.
Melly pointedly tightens his grip on my hand. Despite already holding my attention, I return his squeeze. A bashful expression washes over him, though not enough to make him let go. We reach the edge of where the shoreline meets the forest, trek along it. Look at him. He looks so nice, so sweet, so ready to be of assistance to us. Melly makes small talk on just about everything and anything and everything. It reminds me of our journey before we reached the lake. The more I dwell on it, though, the more I realize how drastically things have changed in a matter of days. Melly's discourse forms a mirror from one time to another in my mind, casting all that has changed in glaring silver. He swings our hands back and forth slightly as he continues to lead the conversation, trying not to let me become too absorbed in my troubled musings. After winding our way around a large stretch of the island, a massively overgrown tree intersects our path. I move to push the offending branches out of the way, but Babale stops me.
Please, let me handle this.
Sir. I let my arm fall as I watch him. Babale unsheaths his sword and chops the branches down with a single blow. He releases a hearty laugh, and I grin at him, the sheer audacity of the action enabling me to ignore his sword misuse.
It's been far too long since I've taken it out. At this rate, I'll forget how to even use a sword before we arrive.
I see.
I unsheathed my own sword and leveled the honed edge at him.
Would you be up for a bout of sparring?
He doesn't miss a beat.
I'll accept that.
I step out onto the sand and give us a little space, and Bamele eagerly trails behind me. We're about to fight this man. I can't believe it. Oh. I was not expecting for him to come out of here smirking, looking pretty AF, you know? Just look at that face. Look at that shit-eating grin. Like, I'm sorry, it's just everything. Once we find our footing, Bamele assumes a defensive stance, center turned away from me and sword drawn in front of his body. I do the same and circle him swiftly, being sure to stay out of his striking distance and watch for the slightest tells of an opening. Whenever he attempts to put some space between us, I dart towards his back, forcing him to stay mostly in place to defend. I take 3 sharp jabs before what I was hoping for happens. He turns to face me, one of his feet landing slightly out of place in loose sand, and I take my opening, striking immediately. Valley regains his balance just before I make contact, though parrying and using his heavier frame to force me back a few steps, even as I jump out from the sword lock. Hoping to catch me off balance from his push strike, but I weave out of the way. Valley has more strength and a larger striking distance than I do, so I've learned to capitalize on my higher agility and smaller hit zone when facing him, even if I usually prefer a more grounded strategy. We trade blows, neither of us scoring a hit, but keeping each other on edge for a little while. Time flows past us easily, and there's nothing that matters but avoiding an attack that will never be lethal, grinning as our steel clashes. Noticing my labored breaths, I call off the fight.
Stop. We can't exert all our energy here.
I releases a winded chuckle.
Thank God there's at least one of us responsible enough to point that out.
I smile and return my sword to its scabbard. Melly does the likewise and glances over at me.
Would it perhaps be all right to at least finish our stroll before sitting back down again?
We shouldn't go the entire length of the island, but I suppose we can walk just a little longer.
It's a deal.
Walk closer to Bamele. I allow myself to drift closer to Bamele. There is not too much space between us as we walk side by side. Melly views me from the corner of his eye and looks more than pleased. Watch. No, that could work. For a brief moment, all of the troublesome circumstances seem to float away from our minds as we enjoy each other's company. I wish it could go on for much longer, but it's only a while later that I have to speak up.
We really should rest before nightfall.
I'm fine with that idea.
Melly leads us over to the area where the guide mentioned we were going to meet. He lowered himself down to the ground and stretched out, right there, presumably intending to wait until the guide arrives. That's a little more dramatic of resting than I planned. I walk over and make myself comfortable next to him, though not as comfortable as he had made himself. It isn't very long until Margaret appears. She doesn't comment on our resting positions. However, she's clearly smirking about it.
Hello, Margaret.
Are you still holding up fine?
I would rather speak of anything other than that.
I think we can manage that.
The three of us quietly wait for the guide's arrival, occasionally chatting with one another as we rest. The sky turns orange as sunset comes upon us. As the colors seem to drain from the world being consumed by the fog, the guide makes his appearance.
It's almost time.
I nod and feel myself grow tense. We truly are about to return to the bridges. All of us wait in an uncomfortable silence until night falls. Silently we stand as one, forming a vigil of sorts, our remaining lanterns illuminating the dark, prepared for tonight's journey. And yet the way forward does not appear. The bridges haven't risen from the depths. I glance to my side. The guide doesn't look at all pleased. The corners of his mouth have harsh bent and briefly loses himself heavy thoughts.
We must go to the shore.
He doesn't offer an explanation for why. Instead, goes on without us, following after the guide, my forehead increasing with swelling worry. Behind me I hear Bamele and Margaret's unsure footsteps. The four of us press onto the shore. The dark water laps the edge of the sand, and as expected, the maze is still hidden beneath the surface. The guide grips his staff tighter, still, his knuckles turning ghostly white. He sucks in a breath of air like he's about to speak, but hesitates. We all stare at him expectantly. After a moment more, the guide is fed up with waiting.
The bridges are late. If they don't arrive as soon as darkness falls, there's no telling exactly how long it will be before they do.
Bamele's face immediately sours. He isn't able to stay silent about his feelings.
So we're going to waste our time standing idly by. There's hardly enough time to make the trip as it is.
Complaining won't make these bridges come any sooner, though I sympathize with your frustrations. The wait had already been tense as it was. Not knowing how much longer it will last makes it that much more dreadful.
Time is by far the least of our worries. On the bridges we are constantly moving, which makes it easier to avoid the prowlers. However, this island does not offer that luxury. We're trapped here.
My body goes rigid as his words sink in.
More importantly, the bridges are raised above the waters. Nixie have difficulties pulling themselves up onto the bridges. The soft sloping of the shore will allow far more prowlers to drag themselves towards us. Not all will be as dangerous as the ones we've encountered thus far. However, we could easily be overwhelmed.
A pit forms deep in my stomach. I stare at him aghast. I had no idea the situation was that dire. I glance from the waterline to the trees. What am I looking for? I don't know. A sign of what might be to come, perhaps.
I wonder if those fires had anything to do with this.
Bamele's words are biting as he wonders aloud. The guide answers Bamele firmly, wanting to put an end to his speculation.
No. Whatever magic controlling the bridges is inconsistent. Humans haven't found a way to impact it. We can only do temporary physical damage to the boards.
Bamele is still displeased. Margaret moves into discussion. Her mood is rapidly declining as well.
Then what should we do? We shouldn't stay on the shore if the monsters could be coming towards us at any moment.
The guide closes his eyes and suddenly looks very worn down.
Staying in the center of the island is the safest option. However, there's the risk that we may not be able to reach the bridges when they do rise. Prowlers could have taken full control of the shore by then. Remaining here with our lanterns will ensure the prowlers cannot move freely.
My brow involuntarily knits together. I don't like the sound of taking additional risk in an area that is already so dangerous, but our options are thin.
I will not be kept on this island for another day, so the shore is where I will be. You may wait at the edge of the forest, or even at the center of the island if you fear being attacked. If the prowlers come between us and you fail to make it to the bridges, I will leave you behind.
Molly spits out hatefully under his breath.
Of course you would.
True, generosity is not something I would expect from the guide, but that is not the conversation we need to have at this moment. The guide has made his decision and we must make ours.
If you were staying by the shore, perhaps I could be positioned somewhat further back from you, and then the others could stay further back still. That would keep us safer, without having any major gaps of darkness between us and the shore.
Good suggestion, Kika.
I'd say that's likely our best option, and we don't have time to come up with any other way regardless.
Settled on the matter, the three of us begin to move away from the guide. He pays little attention to us, instead silently fixing his eyes on the water. I take my place in the middle of the shore, while Bemele and Margaret hover closer to the island's core on the line between dirt and sand. After getting a sense of where they are, I turn my gaze ahead. At first, I think I'm being fooled by the fog. There are several white dots playing along the edge of the water line. Dark globs begin to surface, and I see them for what they are. Eyes. So many white, dribbling eyes gleaming sharply against their pitch-black bodies as the Nixie bob up and down. They surface and disappear in a loop, each time more sets of eyes, and closer, surveying us more intently. Then they cackle. The sound is atrocious, gurgling, then turning high-pitched as they seem to take full stock of us. The light in their eyes somehow seems brighter, as the first of the Nixie dig their claws into the sand and begin dragging themselves upon the shore. I plant my feet firmer. A shrill shriek pierces the air, accompanied by a telltale hiss. I whip my head back towards the sound, only to be greeted by coal-black darkness. I cry out desperately into the void where Margaret and Bemele stood.
What happened?
There's silence. Then there's the best sound possible. Margaret's voice replies, albeit shakily.
There was a prowler in the woods. I didn't notice it until it was already too close to me. I dropped my lantern when I saw it. The light was enough to drive it away, but now it's gone. Shattered.
I swerve my head back to make sure the shore is still clear before I sprint over to release them from the darkness with my own light. Margaret stares down to the ground dejectedly when I arrive. Bemele has his hands placed on her shoulders.
I didn't see the thing either. The monster blended in far too well with the dark, crooked trees of this place.
He gives me a sad smile as I approach the two closer.
We can make a small fire for light.
Margaret sniffles loudly.
That may work for now, but what will we do once we're back on the bridges?
We will manage.
I speak firmly, trying to assure her. I can't even guess how effective the attempt was. Molly begins to gather dry twigs, stones, and grass to craft the fire with. Margaret moves to help him, though she still looks terribly upset. I feel awful. It wasn't her fault. We dig a few inches down to the sand soil before making an edge with the rocks to stop the fire from giving us a repeat of last night. I layer the fuel quickly and light the match at the base of the pit. Margaret stokes the fire, with Bemele feeding it in twigs. The grass ignites easily and showers the area with enough light to keep anything else that may be lurking in the forest at bay. I release a discreet sigh. We were truly lucky no one was injured or lost during this ordeal. I keep that thought to myself, however. Hearing it would only make Margaret feel worse.
You should go back to your position, Kika. It will all be for nothing if we can't make it onto the bridges in the first place.
Right.
I force myself to sound bold.
We're going to get through this.
Margaret attempts to smile at me, and Bemele waves as I cautiously back up to my original position. I return my full focus to the shore as we feared. This is becoming a pressing situation. More prowlers rose from the waters while my attention was on those two. They surrounded the guide on both sides. The only way to gain distance from them would be to delve further into the island, yet the guide shows no sign of giving up his position. And that's where we'll end that one. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, hit like. That way I know you're enjoying the content I'm making. Hit subscribe. That way YouTube brings you back. Here's what happens next. I won't take up any more of your time. Have a good day, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.